Hey guys, welcome to a little bit of a different video here on the channel. With most people being in the BNR waiting room for this Monday, I thought this was the perfect time to cherry pick some cool stuff that I've experienced on my TCG timeline and take you through a lot of what defined me and still defines me to this day as a player, as a person. So this is basically my open love letter to the game, and then I will end off the video with an important message. So let's get into things. This is a lot of years ago. This is back in 2002. I played the Pokemon TCG. I fell in love with competitive card gaming already back then. This is me on the right side of this picture. I was lucky enough to win the nationals for my age group, age 11 to 14 rather. You see me down here with my deck list. I still have my deck with me to this day. I played a Feraligatr strategy. Those who know. This was the best deck at the time. Back then, things weren't that competitive. Like, we knew this was a good deck. We played 4 of all the good cards. Decks were reasonably optimized, but there was still a lot of, getting things done your way type of vibe. Also, I remember this format was kind of new. It was called modified. We were used to being allowed to play with all the cards, so you can see this as the first standard in Magic terms. We couldn't just go online and see what everybody played, so we kind of have to slug our way through and hopefully end up with a good deck. And I was lucky to have a good deck here. I took down what I remember to be something like a 70, 80 player tournament. I won a trip to the US where I would compete in the World Championship in Seattle in 2002. On that trip, I bought my first Magic cards, and I also played my last Pokemon tournament, which was the world's main event, in which I went 2-3. It's funny, there's a record for that kind of stuff. I think you needed a can't remember what kind of record you needed. Anyway, I was out of contention after my 3rd loss, so I guess you needed like a 4-2 record on 6 rounds, maybe? I can't remember. I missed day 2. I went to a local store called Card House in Seattle, bought my first cards, and never looked back, which is crazy to think about. I remember whenever I played a Pokemon tournament at my local store or went to another store in another city, there would always be Magic players playing, alongside us at the other tables, and I would always be interested in peeking over and stuff like that. I also think it made an impact on me that on the packs it said like 13 plus on Magic and up to 13 on Pokemon, because back then Wizards of the Coast were probably interested in keeping these card gamers in the, keep them in-house, right? And, transcending from Pokemon to Magic. And that succeeded with me. I started playing Magic back then, and I slowly worked my way up. Next deck we have here, fast forward to 2013. This is the first time I ever traveled for a tournament that wasn't just in, Denmark or maybe across the bridge in Sweden. And I went to a GP Strasbourg 2013. So this was my first competitive tournament abroad, which is surprising for a lot of people. The reason I didn't feel like traveling, I was very picky with my company, let me put it that way. So I just played at my local store, was one of the, better players, I guess, more accomplished players. But I didn't really take the leap. I didn't bother watching coverage on SCG. I didn't read any forums like MTG The Source, like all of my friends did. I didn't really treat the game as a sport at this point. This was all playing around. So let's try and look at this list here. I played Jeskai Landstill with Geistersaintracht. I finished top 16 at this GP. I had amazing matches. I beat a Hall of Famer, I remember. My friends also did well. Thomas won the GP. Michael placed top 4. They played each other in the semifinals, and the 3 of us were rooming together on this trip. I remember Thomas booked a table for 3 at a Michelin restaurant for the winner dinner before we left. It was, a great memory. That certainly pushed me into pursuing Magic on a more serious level. So let's look at this list here. We have Cavern of Souls here in order to play Uncounterable Geists. Pretty weird. We have, I think, Snapcaster and Click sharing the wizard type, so maybe you can do something there. The factories here, obviously for standstill. Couple of wastelands, so infinite non-blue lands here. 24 lands is awesome to see. 4 spell pierces. I guess this is just solid deck building, right? Ton of spot mana removal, so I can clear the way and play standstill. And then we have Pierce and Force and Clicks to balance against combo. Probably what was going on here with the deck building. The deck played out very well. My favorite play from this tournament was I played against, this was round 9 on day 1. I played against Temur Delver, and I had a hand that with only fetches to get going. I didn't want to get stifled. So what I did was I played turn 1 Cavern of Souls naming Goblins so that I could get my opponent to tap out rather than hold up Stifle. Because I believe at the time Goblins was a 2-color deck and Stifle would be better later on against, you know, Matron and Ringleaders. That was the thought anyway. My opponent ended up tapping out for a Tarmogoyf, which I could then, if I remember correctly, force and then slam a standstill. After I cracked my fetch land, I got into the game. I won that round, and it felt like one of the first big plays I made under pressure. And funnily enough, this play, thinking outside the box in the exact scenario of competing against exactly this guy in this situation, taking advantage of everything I can. This is something I'm very, very proud about because this is 12 years ago at the time of this video, and I certainly wasn't any big shot player at the time. I had a good head. I knew what was going on, but as you can see, I was mainly trying to do my own thing here, which was pretty cool. And I succeeded at that. Top 16 finish at a highly competitive GP. Love to see it. Let's see here. Generic cards like enchantment artifact, anti-combo, anti-graveyard, anti-blue, anti-weenies, and then some catch-all here. Yeah, this looks very typical for me at the time. Like, 2 blasts is funny to see because, you know, Miracles was legal here, countering, counterbalance seems like a good idea, so that's a bit crazy. 5 Graveyard Hate. I don't even remember which decks we needed Graveyard Hate for, aside from maybe shutting down, I don't know, Fast and Flames out of Storm or something, but pretty cool tournament. All right, next year, 2014, I still kept playing a lot of Paper Legacy every week, every month. Kept going to the bigger tournaments, kept sharpening my blade here, and I decided to bring a Storm deck to the Nationals. This is the biggest Legacy tournament that's ever been held in Denmark. I believe it was 130 players, and I was lucky to win the tournament. Maybe not lucky, maybe I was just fortunate. And I played Storm. So 2 cool things here I want to mention is I did not play Gitaxian Probe and Cabal Therapy. At the time, I remember I didn't believe that was any good. I would rather have the better cantrips and the sure thing discard spells. So obviously, looking back, that is very funny to think about because those are obviously better deck building choices. The Limbo's Vault here, sometimes I played Grim Tutor. I had played maybe one more, I can't remember, but that was like a little bit of more consistency, very standard build here, aside from the sideboard, I guess, because the second thing I wanted to mention was 4 Dread of Nights. And remember, the history of Death and Taxes is very rich in Denmark, so at the time, you basically did not want to lose to Thomas Enevoldsen or anybody who thought they were Thomas Enevoldsen, so 4 Dread of Night was kind of funny to see. Because the card, sure, it takes out like Thalia, Mother of Runes, stuff like that, but a card like Meddling Mage still stays on the table unless I have double. I remember playing against Mono White in the tournament, and I Infernal Tutored, revealing a Dread of Night, and then slam double Dread of Night. It's just pretty funny to see here. Empty the Warrens, good sideboard playing here against Force of Will decks, basically, so that you kind of keep them guessing whenever you're accelerating and cantripping. Abrupt Decays here because of Counterbalance, which, funnily enough, didn't see that much play, even though it was an incredible deck. So I guess there's kind of a skill ceiling on that deck. Fun times indeed. All right, now we're kind of moving into my Magic Online era here a little bit. So I started playing a lot of Modern. I started to chase going to the Pro Tour. That was a big goal of mine, and this is a very innovative deck that was very close to being broken, yet still so far. So let me explain here. I was one of the first ones to put Mistress Bauble into a deck and kind of realizing its deck building potential. In this deck, it was enabling the Delve creatures. I play 8 Delve creatures. We have a little bit of a combo potential here, milling over Lingering Souls with Thought Scour. Lingering Souls was just naturally very good at decks with Pile of Spot Removal that the fatties would not be good against. And then the fatties here plus, Stubborn Denial would be your way to kind of beat the more combo-oriented decks. This deck was very, very good for me. I think the only thing I needed in order to realize its full potential was simply realizing Death Shadow was a card. If I had realized that, this deck would have been incredible at the time. Cheap disruption. You might even move away from white at that point, but the whole point was if we had to have Death Shadow on top of these creatures, we don't care about fetching shocks. We could have added Street Wraith, and then we would just build the first generation of, the Grixis Shadow deck that would become the best deck in the format. But I didn't, and I still had good results, which was kind of cool to see. I remember getting featured on a Card Market coverage, little small interview about the deck. And yeah, it was just cool to see. So the sideboard here, you see some fun ones. Stony, obviously, not fun for the affinity player. Some random life gain against Burn. Plains here to, again, Burn was a big deck at the time, so Plains here was awesome. And Phyrexian Unlife was also a card against Burn. So basically saying you gain 10 life. So you have Rest for the Weary and Phyrexian Unlife with a basic Plains. I mean, that's a lot of stuff against Burn. It's just very, very cool to see how different metagames, different solutions, smaller card pool, back in time, what led us here. That's part of why I'm making this video, is what made me the Magic player I am today. And certainly all of these things that I've decided to highlight contribute to that. All right, now it's a little bit of a heartbreak time. So I decided at some point that I wanted to play a lot of blue Scapeshift. I practiced so hard. Big inspiration to this was Thomas Enevoldson. He used to play this deck a lot when I didn't know anything about Modern. I like the strategy, delay the game, win in one big swoop. So that's exactly what I did for a whole day, trying to qualify for the MOX. Back then, the MOX was like 400 players, last man standing. I make it all the way to the finals, and unfortunately, I was not able to close the deal. I time out with lethal Valakut triggers on the stack here. Long story about how that came about, but yeah, some life choices were certainly made here, and I missed out on a big opportunity. I think back then, if you got to the MOX, you qualified for a bunch of stuff, including setting yourself up well for becoming like a gold pro and making it more into something of a career, but that was not meant to be. After a little bit of correspondence with the awesome support crew over at Wizards, they decided to give me a special invite for the Pro Tour that year in Vancouver, which was, that was pretty cool. I didn't care too much about going there and playing Standard, but I cared a lot about, getting to that tournament. I got some new friends there. This is where I met Andrea Mangucci. He set me up for a place to stay during the tournament, and we've been friends ever since. So obviously, making new friends and having a good time is very important. I didn't bother testing for this PT. I drafted a lot. I didn't play Standard, so my results, it showed. Let me say that. So I started off the tournament 4-0, which already locked me for day 2 after a 3-0 in draft, and I won my first Standard round. I played Siege Rhino, Abzan, kind of a bigger version with the 5-mana Tragic Arrogance card. And from there, I just get crushed in Standard, make day 2, drop after a handful of rounds. Got to play against some Hall of Famers. Got to see my Scandinavian brothers do well. I think this is the Pro Tour that Martin Dang is winning, or maybe it's Joel. Can't remember. It was back in those days. So yeah, this was also just cool to make it to the PT and have a good time there. Trying to develop as a player, trying to figure out what I want to do. So just look at the sideboard, just for reference here. 4 cards against what I believe was Twin and Control. 4 cards against Seize Rhino, Abzan. 3 cards against Affinity. 4 cards against Burn. I mean, come on, feed the clan. I really didn't want to lose to Burn at that point. All right, back to paper, back to Legacy. The year after was another iteration of Danish Legacy Masters, and this time I split the finals. I remember my opponent really wanted the title. So when you Google this, I will be second place. I don't care about that to this day. It happens every month as well on Magic Online. I'm happy to give my opponent the win if I can get to bed a little bit earlier. So Miracles back then, whew, what a deck. I didn't play it for a long time. So this says a lot about, I thought I was competitive back then, but now I can see that was just, rookie night, right? I wasn't competitive at all because it's the absolute first time I ever played Miracles, and it was a treat to play. So the biggest thing looking back is the way that the cards just covered the format so well. The blue cards, of course, including Counterbalance and Top to kind of handle unfair stuff, and then you had Terminus to handle, creatures. So how do you beat Miracles? You beat creatures. You beat Miracles by not being a creature deck and by not being a combo deck, unless you have like very diversified mana costs. So that's kind of part of what made that deck so good. It had a good mana base. The win conditions was a little bit clunky, if I remember correctly, but that's just how it is. We can't have it all. I went for the red splash here with access to a little bit of artifact removal, small creature sweeper. I don't even know why. I guess something like Death and Taxes, Infect, Maverick type of decks. Blasts are kind of self-explanatory, and then Blood Moon against decks that tried to go bigger. Again, very generic here with the Flusters and Surgicals, very typical for my deck building at the time, and then a couple of Mentors for when you have a good idea the opponent will not have spot removals. You can kind of play this card, and that's all you have to do, right? Then you just have to protect the queen or play the game. As I say, Monastere Mentor is a card that rewards you for simply playing the game, so we do like those cards. All right, it looks like we're back into scape-shifting people in Modern. This is from a World Magic Cup qualifier. This exact deck list was dubbed Snake Shift because of the addition of Coiling Oracle. At the time, Death Shadow was the deck to beat, so that's why I wanted to go into white. Paths would handily handle that card, and if the opponent is playing creatureless, you can maybe even path one of your own Snapcasters or Oracles to ram yourself into a win sooner than the opponent expects. We did get a little bit of flexibility here. Now we don't have to register 4 Scape Shift, but we, in practice, have access to 6, thanks to Bring to Light. Single copy of Supreme Verdict would kind of be the only card worth adding to the main deck for flexibility. In the board, we had Crumble to Dust, single Baloth, single Slaughter Game, single Timely Reinforcements, bullets for the most normal scenario, even Shatterstorm here. Spellskite, I believe, handled Infect and Splinter Twin, while Swan Song was very... kind of like a Dispel that also countered stuff like Blood Moon. So yeah, pretty cool times. This is yeah, I get very happy when I look at these deck lists. Unfortunately, I end up losing the finals in this tournament, losing to Slaughter Games out of a Living End deck. I remember playing my pants off. I don't even know if that's an expression. I played very well against that deck. I never exposed a creature for violent not for Demonic Dread. So let's say when the opponent resolved the Beast Within, I made sure to kill it with Path. If I played a Sakura Tri-Builder, I sacked it on my own turn. When I played Snapcaster, I killed it right away. Because my only out was my opponent couldn't find Violent Outburst and only the other one. So if I kept all creatures off the table, I could buy time. But my opponent found a Slaughter Games before I found any of my Bring to Light Scape Shifts. And he booked a ticket to the World Magic Cup. So another close one. I remember using it as fuel to do better. 1 year after, or at least the next calendar year, I traveled to Germany to play a Paper Legacy tournament. And this is also one of my favorite decks of all time. So for those who weren't around back then, we had Deathrite Shaman basically tying together a deck so that I could play Lightning Bolt, Leovold, Hymn to Torag in the same deck. Pretty absurd scenes. Deathrite was a 1-drop that was good turn 1, good turn 10. Very likely too strong for Legacy in its own right, but also a card that homogenized because of the casting cost here. So you would play it in your Elves deck, you would play it in your Control deck, you would play it in your Delver deck, thanks to the mana, the very flexible mana value here. So you can also point at its 2 toughness being very strong. Otherwise, it would die to a lot more cards. But at the end of the day, this deck was a treat to play because we got to play the generic disruptions of him that forces, the best spot removal, the best grindy game with Snapcaster Call Against Command, Baleful Strix, just bread and butter, very good card at prolonging the game, Jace to take over. and some murderous cuts to be basically poor man's Swords to Plowshares here. It looks like, again, I'm very focused on not losing to small creatures. Double Marsh Casualties, a single Toxic. Looks kind of crazy on paper, but must have been reasonable at the time. Yeah, let me know if you remember why I would play all of those, because killing True Name Nemesis is cool and all, but this is a lot. So I ended up winning this tournament. I made a cool play in the finals where I have a Jason play against Sneak and Show, and my opponent has a Sneak Attack in play. So basically, I can't beat a creature. My opponent has a fetch line in play, so I just decide ahead of time that I'm going to let my opponent keep the card no matter what. So I look at the +2 my Jace, look at the top card of my opponent's deck, and I leave it there with pretty big confidence, predetermined confidence. It's an Emrakul, by the way. And then they shuffle with Scalding Tarn. They check the top, which they should, to see, you know, how I'm acting. And when they spotted the Emrakul, it was the opponent felt like they were not winning that one, and I was lucky to dodge a few more draw steps if I remember correctly, and I ultimate Jace for the win. Very nice paper win here. I believe it was maybe like an 80-player tournament or something along those lines. Okay, back to more modern paper tournament here. This is the teams era of Magic that I love that a lot. Team trios, I obviously play with my boys. Michael in the standard seat, Thomas in the legacy seat, and fun story there is Thomas didn't play mono white at this tournament. Thomas played the 4-color control deck, so I think he lost a little once too many to call against command and decided to flip to that deck. So we practiced it a little bit, but I just briefly found out that he was. I thought I was good with the deck, but he was, poof, yeah, he was insane. Best player I've ever had the pleasure of preparing with. And he handled that deck like a champ. Bloodbraid Elf just got unbanned, and I think it was a mistake to put it in this deck, because as you can see, if I hit Sweltering Suns, might be how I wrote atrocious. If I hit Bolt, kind of inconsequential to this deck's game plan. But if I hit Ramp, it's very awesome. So I guess I was 2/3, so something along those lines to hit Ramp, so maybe it was fine. At the very least, I hit whatever I needed during the day. I remember playing against a Karn at 6 loyalty, then I hit the Bolt, then whenever I needed a ramp, I hit a ramp. So I was high rolling for sure in this tournament. I had an incredible personal record here. My sideboard looks like we're trying to have creatures against, you know, grindy decks with counter spells and discard spells, maybe even burn, a little bit of disenchant effects. Beast Within can even be lane destruction. Then a single Anger as like a dredge anti-weenie card. Humans, I remember, was a deck at the point. I made the Sweltering Suns because it had cycling. We made it all the way to the finals. My matchup was bad in the finals. Grixis Death Shadow was not a good matchup. I lose that match. Can't remember the other guys' results, but we end up losing. The Brits took it down, Ben Jones and the boys. So that qualified us for the Magic Pro Tour 25th anniversary, which was also teams. So at that tournament, we played with Elias Watchfeld, the draft master, instead of Michael. Michael decided to pursue greener pastures, and we did well. I think we topped 24th, which was a big feat at the time. And again, I had a very, very strong record piloting a Titan Shift deck. So off of that, let's call it a little bit of success while also playing a lot online and doing mainly vintage. I got the opportunity to collect the team for the Team Vintage Super League, and to the surprise of no one, I wanted to play with Thomas and Michael, and this was basically my favorite era of Magic here, because I got to play the formats I loved, and my love for playing online Magic was blooming at this point. I loved how clean it was, how flexible it was when it comes to time, and I still had the social aspect, so I didn't really feel like there was any drawback for me. We do well in this tournament. We make it all the way to the finals against the good old CFB team here of LSV, Josh Adderlayton, and Sam Pardee. But yeah, I just remember LSV crushed us in the finals, and then when we met him at the Pro Tour, he came to our table and he said, "Oh, aren't you the famous guys who were the runner-ups for the Team Vintage Super League?" And that was just, yeah, I love that kind of banter, because he crushed us single-handedly in the finals. I think he 4-1'd us or whatever on his own. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, I guess when you look back, it's a lot of second places for me, but I think that's actually very, very humbling. But let's see here. All right, new season 2019 2019 new season of Vintage Super League, and this is a single player tournament, so I got the invite here coming off of the second place. I remember this very fondly. It was just as cool playing against all the personalities that I basically viewed as my idols for so many years, and all of a sudden I'm competing alongside them. And at the end of it, I was even able to beat them all and become the champion here. So very, very cool. And yeah, they mentioned here in the Hipsters article, Peterson is the captain of Team Snap Cardster and was the runner-up in Season 8. Yeah, we sure were the runner-ups in Season 8, and LSV didn't... he wasn't too shy to remind us in case we forgot. Next season of Super League was a Team Modern one, so obviously all my brothers in arms, Thomas and Michael, and we end up taking down this tournament after a great finals. I didn't remember this part, though, that I 3-0'd. We were back 3-1, I remember. I remember this because at just a few years prior to this, my favorite basketball player and his team were down 1-3 in the NBA Finals, came back, won it as the first team ever, I believe. So I kind of had that energy here. We were down 3-1, we played best of 7, and we were able to rattle off the wins in the end to take it down. And this is exactly what I wanted to highlight. The success is made even more impressive by the fact that they used 25 different decks over the course of the season and never played a deck more than once. Yeah, that is exactly what playing on the Super League is. Part-time entertainment, part competition for me. So I just said to the guys, this is like a huge blessing. We need to be true to that and play different decks every week. I will build the decks if you guys don't have the time. I just want to showcase that Magic has a lot of different stuff to offer, and that we're very grateful for this opportunity, and that we care about the product, that the entertainment value, basically. So we ended up winning this our way, playing 25 different decks over 5 weeks, and it felt very good to win this. I'm not gonna lie. So I guess this is a lesson that how you get there is very important, and how we got there this time around was certainly something to remember. All right, now let's fast forward to 2024. This is the peak of what I've ever accomplished. And funnily enough, we're looking at a control deck not that far, not that long ago. This is only a year and a couple of months ago. So I've always tried to give it a good shot at qualifying for the MOX. You need to go through the whole showcase structure, top 8 a showcase, then win a 30-person tournament. And there's only going to be 3 of those each year. And then that one person goes through as the legacy representative into the 8-player MOX. So I succeeded doing that last year. I remember I 5-0'd a last chance with a weird Hymn to Torag, Dodgy Voidwalker Stifle deck. And then when I qualified, I did my research about who's qualified, how can I exploit the metagame. So this is actually the perfect example of why Control needs a very, very established metagame in order to shine. So I researched a metagame of a lot of the Demir decks, like Reanimator stuff. This is how we can explain, main deck Endurance, even more Graveyard Hate in the sideboard. The Goblins deck back then, the Muxus Turbo Muxus deck, had 5 players qualified. So did Mono Red Prison. So this basically explains a lot of Blasts, a lot of Thralls. And then from there, it was kind of a mixed bag here. So I just made sure that I had Carpet against Tempo, the Blast and the Thralls. I had Ursa Saga covered with a couple of dress downs, and then I basically added some flex slots here. Needle, can always name some cool stuff. Null Rod can shut down some nasty combo decks you would otherwise have a tough time against. And then I played Sabo's Web as kind of an anti-lands card, because I think one player might be on lands. Also note that this is a 0 Force Negation 75, because nobody played like Storm, Sneak and Show, and stuff like that. So very, very unique metagame that I decided that Control was the best solution for, which is kind of crazy to think about. I end up playing a Control Mirror in the finals. It basically comes down to time. My opponent makes a slight misclick on the order of, the escape and the ETB on Uro, so they accidentally put it into the yard before resolving the first ability. And then I have a window to endurance it, and I kind of grind away with the game. This qualified me for the 8-player MOX, and it qualified me for the Pro Tour. And it was a huge breakthrough for me because I worked pretty hard to get there. Obviously, a lot of other people also did that, but for me, it was significant, and it certainly motivated me to keep going and focus exactly more on playing the game at the highest level while also providing content that is kind of giving a look into how I view things. So that brings me to the next picture here. I, some months ago now, decided to create Ecos Barony, which is basically a community where like-minded people who want to have fun with the game, who wants to experiment with the game, who wants to clinch their goals, who wants to share their excitement about new decks, new builds, new tech, new sideboarding strategies, and try and move forward together. So I basically try to embody how I work about the game and how I'm helping others, or at least inspiring others to do the same, whether it's via coaching or my feedback whenever people share ideas, or just give a new perspective on how to attack a game like Magic. So 138 people already think it's worth their $10 every month, and I'm of course very, very thankful for that, which brings me to my last and final message here. I've decided that it's the right thing for me to keep going, work even harder on welcoming new Barons to the fold. It's what makes me happy. I like to see other people succeed. I get to combine what I did in my previous job, which is basically realizing people's potential, with my love for Magic, and this combination makes a lot of sense for me, and it will continue to do so, and I will be very, very happy to see you over there. As I said, it's $10 per month. I realize that could be a lot of money for some people, but I can promise you, if you care about Magic, if you care about your development, if you care about being part of a special community, if you want to take part in my free tournaments, also all my MTGO winnings I give directly into the community. I have around 1,000 treasure chests on my account right now that I'm just waiting to put into tournament initiatives, that I'm ready to put into giveaways, and that is just going to happen over and over. So I can highly recommend it. People are giving me awesome feedback over there. They either, rekindled their love for the game, or they got inspired to think about Magic in a new way, and simply just taking on challenges and having fun while doing so. I say all of that to say this: it's been one hell of a journey, but it's not close to over, and I thank you so much for your support and your attention, and I hope to see you back with a fresh format come Monday, and then it's time to get to work. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you, guys.